welcome to the NEWSPASTE Podcast with me, your host, Johnny Vedmore, and I'm here today with someone who I can happily call a friend. I'm really happy when you go on the journey through independent journalism, to meet a like-minded folk, to meet someone who is you feel akin with, is a special feeling. When you get on with them, that's even better. And I love this man. I've spoken to him a fair few times on my own radio show. I just completely adore him. So, Graham H. Moore, without further ado, how are you, my friend?
I'm very well, thank you, Johnny. And again, that it's reciprocal. Let me just give I don't know how often you speak to him, but I think I actually found you more in depth on the Lawrence Easman podcast.
Oh.
And again, Lawrence, I found to be so genuine. His guests are superb. And I think you was either co-hosting with him or you was on there as a guest or vice versa. And then I just thought, saying this guy actually has got it. He's doing what real journalists should do. And I think I actually said to you at one stage, let me put it this way. I've always put this question: either the person is stupid or he's very brave. All right. And from the articles I'd read, from doing readouts of your articles, and obviously showing your website, etc., I come to the conclusion that you was very intelligent, which only left the other option, which was you was very brave to be doing what you're doing, because you're actually telling people the truth.
Oh, it's a dangerous place to hang around. It's a very unpopular, every time that you get a tiny little bit of popularity with telling the truth, you're about to pop another bubble for a load of people who aren't expecting it. I have got something coming up. It's related to Elon Musk. It can't not come out. It is possibly seminal peace territory in very short amount of time. I've really nailed something, and it's really interesting. I mean, really. I'd love to be able to speak about it, but I know I'm going to make a lot of people who, in a certain paradigm, very angry at a time when they're at the peak of that paradigm, and those are dangerous places to be. But you're the same. I mean, I had already, because I was when I heard you doing a Youngkerman read through. I was just like, "Oh my God, that's amazing! That's beautiful." But I'd already, as I've been watching you on and off for about a year, and it was really interesting because you don't know people, and sometimes you just want to watch somebody, and you're that type of character. You see that in the response of your following, because you have one of the most loyalist group of supporters that I've ever come across. Really, some of the most kind-hearted. They really well. You exist in a territory where it could be considered nationalistic, so negative, automatic. And that's not what you get from your crowd at all. Your crowd are very traditionally cultured, and they're very kind, they're very honest, and they're very open. They don't need to be rude so that they can get their points across. They know that they're using logic, they're using their sense of tradition. They want to keep their cultures in a good way. They want to keep their traditions in a good way. They're not doing things out of malice. So I really appreciate your crowd. Where did you start off? I mean, let's get back to the beginning. Before all of this, what were you doing back when?
Well, so where do you want? So that question obviously leads to where did I get my interest in the law, or are you asking where did the online stuff start? But I mean, because
Where
one
did
goes back a
Graham
lot.
H. Moore start?
Right. Well, I can start right at the very beginning.
It's a very good place to
I was
start.
born. No. So let me just make sure everyone understands where I'm coming from. So um, I was born in Fulham. My family lived in a place called basically we used to call it the buildings, right? They were the poor places that were built, and funny enough, they was built by again, people often call me an anti-Semite. They was built by a guy called Samuel. Let me make sure I can get his right. I'll come back to his name in a couple of seconds. But basically, this guy was a Jew, and he took money, he lent money to rich people. He made an extraordinary amount of money in the late 1800s, early 1900s. He lent money to the king. He lent money to all of the aristocracy, right? And what he actually did was charge them massive amounts of interest, which anyone knows as a Christian is unlawful usually. But what did he do? He used all that money and he built places for the poor to live, and he put regulations in place that you couldn't go over a certain rent, you couldn't do this, you couldn't do that. If you earned too much money, you weren't allowed to live there. And in these days, so again, we lived, and it was on Fulham Broadway. We lived in them flats. So I was born there. By the way, I was a twin, or am a twin.
Identical or non-identical?
No, my twin sister. So again, I wasn't a gentleman because I come out first. So what happened then after that? My dad was a metal spinner. People don't realise that it was a really good trade. He worked for his dad. His dad was in the First World War. There's a big history around all of this, right? But the main point that everyone should understand about this is that my granddad was in the big union. You know, when they all dropped tools, there was a massive, great big, we're not going to work anymore in 1924. Prior to that, he come back from the First World War. His brother had got mustard gas down his lungs and virtually destroyed his breathing. In 1919, what a lot of people don't know, there was a big march and rebellion outside Buckingham Palace, where a lot of the people had come back from the First World War. They weren't very happy how they'd been treated. People don't realise that there was rebellions on the front with the people, and a lot of them were shot and other things happening. So my granddad was all part of that. He could have been described as a bit of a commie at first, right? But when he come back from all them places, and when he come back from that war, he completely changed his mind. Eventually, he built up, and with his trade, and had his own factory where he was on the lathe. He owned a local pub in Hammersmith where the locals all used to come in. So, and by the way, he was also the regimental heavyweight boxing champion, right? So he was no mug. Why am I saying this? Because my dad was working for him. He lived in the flats, and was a working class person. And then he won the pools.
Ah!
Right?
Oh my God! What, the football?
So yeah, my dad won the football pools.
Oh, my nan would have. Oh,
Right. And he was a normal working man. But instead of doing what everyone else would have done with the money, and I'm talking about somewhere in the region of £2,500, right?
Okay, wait. Can I just get you to describe the pools to our American audience?
So the pools, the pools basically is the football draw. So you go through a bit of paper and you guess what the score draws are going to be. So
Like
as
an
you go
X or
through
one
all the
or two.
yeah. So you would say, I think you work. I've never done it, right? But so, let's say you was working out what all the draws was going to be. West Ham versus Tottenham, 2-2, you ticket, right? Or you put 2-2, and all of a sudden they go through this thing. If you got all the draws correct, then all the money that's been put in from everywhere would go to you, or it's a split prize. He won £2,500 in, let's say, 1950, right?
Ooh, that's
Which was
nice.
a lot of money, right? And he shared it with my other granddad.
Dangerous in the hands of a gambling man.
Yeah. So what my dad did, he was a working man. He still went to work on his bike every day, even though he won the pools, right? And he bought some properties and he rented them out in Fulham, right? So, and in those you could buy. He bought a house for £500 in Fulham, right? He then put money in and purchased his own factory. So he bought his own factory, got the lathes in. He always worked on the lathe. He was an engineer, a metal spinner. He brought some people in to help him. Listen to this, people, because he couldn't read and write. And one of the reasons he couldn't read and write, apart from being dyslexic, he was great with his hands, was because he lived through the war years and they was being bombed all the time. He got they moved him out of London. So all of them things affected the way in which he grew up and he had an education. But he never gave up. And he won the polls. He did that. And what I'm trying to explain to people is that's the sort of background that I come from. I describe myself as working class, meaning I haven't got a degree. And one of the things that I try and tell people everywhere is that the universities and academia are corrupt to the core. Every one of our institutions is corrupt to the core. And it was termed by the Marxists as a slow march through the institutions. And that is what has taken place. And one of the things is, I wouldn't say it's a pet hate, but people that say to me, oh, yeah, I'm working class. My mum and dad was this. And I say, what do you do now? And they say, oh, I'm a lawyer. I went to university. I've done this, but I'm working class. And I say to them, you're not working class. You can never be working class. Your parents may have been working class, but you're not. You are now middle class. Now, I'm not into the class system, right? I'm not. So in other words, I don't automatically dislike someone who is middle class. I look at their character, the same as I don't automatically dislike black people or brown people. I look at their character, right? So again, if a middle class person is looking down their nose, or I have done the research to understand that what they have been taught in their university, and especially places like the London School of Economics, which is a Fabian university, or Oxford, which is communist, and Cambridge, again, same thing. All of these places, they have misinstructed people on the English Constitution, right? And they have done it deliberately. And then once they start educating people and lawyers, the lawyers become judges. So everyone is then misinstructed. That's the way to work. So getting back to where did I come from? 30 years ago, I was set up.
You're only 30.
No, 30 years ago. I'm not only 30. I'm a little bit older than that, not a lot. People say to me, how old are you, Graham? I say 28. I'm stuck at 28. I'll always be 28. Right?
I'm 27, so that's good.
That's what I'm saying. And you're looking good for it, and also, right? So the major thing is, 30 years ago, I was set up by the police for a major crime. It was presented by the mainstream media. The mainstream media was in on the crime being completely crooked. The prosecution was, the judge was, and this is no BS, people, right? Anyone listening to this now should understand one thing, right? I do not like the banks. I do not like the banking system. I don't like how they are operated. And for various reasons, I was attacking them in the background, right? The point being, I was sent to prison for a long time as a category A and at one point AAA prisoner, meaning the highest form of security that you could possibly get, right? That means being strip searched every day. That means being woken up 15 minutes, every 15 minutes during the night, having a red light on in your cell every night. Everywhere you go within that prison, within a prison, you have 2 dogs and a number of prison officers with you, right? It is the nastiest form of mental abuse any state can put on you. And I went through that process for a very long time, right? Why am I saying this to people? Because I've always been honest about it. I've always said to people, listen, these people, if they could do it to me, they will do it to you. The difference is you won't even know that they're doing it, right? Tick, 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 tick. And I'm giving you an example now. The banking industrial complex, the military industrial complex, the pharmaceutical industrial complex, and people need to know this as well, there is an industrial complex in relation to prison. Prison is a business, right? The judiciary system, the law and order system has become a business. And in order for that business to work, they need people in custody. They need people being processed through their system. And you are the cannon fodder for that, right? There are countries that have got a complete opposite system. One of them is Norway. Another one, partially more, is Denmark and Sweden, right? That do things in a different way. America have more prisoners now than most countries in the world, more executions, more process, because that whole system has been transferred over to the United States of America, which we could get into. But the main thing, so where do I come from? The easiest thing to explain to people is imagine Lucy Letby, right? And I know some people out there are going to be pulling their hand out listening to this, right? I am 100% telling you the system will bury anyone who starts to show that an individual is better than them, right? So you get, for example, on a certain ward, right, you'll get a lot of doctors that are being shown up as being completely incompetent by someone who's done the job for years, hands-on, that cares about the people on the ward, in this case, babies, right? But the system itself is the National Health Service, and it is a medical industrial complex, right? So much money involved that they are part of the system, and that system will do everything to protect itself, including putting someone in prison that has started to highlight what they are doing wrong with the faults with the system, because they can't afford for people to understand what exactly is going on. It's no different to the banking system. It's no different to the judiciary. It's no different to the current parliamentary system. It's no different to the monarchy. It's no different. They're all of the same type systems. And at the root cause, which I'm not going to get into on this program, is the dark triad, right? And that is the personality types that put themselves in the positions and would stab anyone in the back to ensure that they survive and everyone else. And it don't matter who you are, what you are. And that's exactly what happened to Lucy Letby. So the same thing happened to me, not with obviously several life sentences, but you start to turn on the system. For me, it was always about the banks, and it still is to a large extent. It's a control mechanism. Usury is a control mechanism. It's an enslavement mechanism used by the dark triad to keep you enslaved, right? So that's where I come from. And then as we went through, I could see, I started to read law. So just to make sure everyone gets this, so I'm going to show this on the podcast. You probably won't be able to see it properly, but I did show this a few times, and I'm going to show you a couple of little bits. Now, I've got an almost complete law library here, right? Nice. So as you look on these books, right, this one is the first part of the Institutes of the Laws of England by Sir Edward Coke, right? That's volume 2. There's volume 1. Common law going back hundreds, if not thousands of years, right? And this is English, not British, right? And then what people have to understand about the Constitution is our Constitution is written with a number of constitutional statutes, but also charters going back centuries, right? Including the Magna Carta. Before that, you had the Charters of the Forest. You also had the Charter of Liberties. You had independent cities that had their own charters. City of London with one of them, etc. So all of that is encompassed into our Constitution, right? Why am I actually putting it over like this? Because people need to understand that the common law and the Constitution of England is the ultimate social justice system, right? There is nothing better. It completely opposes the Roman Empire, the Roman system of law. it completely gives you freedom as much as possible without complete. So there's an anomaly with words. Some people refer to anarchy and believe it's chaos. They're two different things.
Yeah,
So if you
I'm
look
with
at a
you there.
scale, if you look at a scale, and you have a middle part there, right bang in the middle, right? Everything to the left is authoritarian. That means fascism, that means communism, and all different forms where it's centrally controlled and you don't have any rights against the state, right? I'm what's known as a constitutionalist, which means you go the other side, right? And on the other side, right at the other side, further than a constitutionalist, is an anarchist, right? Now, anarchist means no rulers whatsoever, right? Which you still have sets of rules, etc., within your communities, but you're nowhere near centrally controlled anywhere, right? That's what real anarchy means, right? And it does not mean everyone goes around stabbing each other and doing what they want.
It's more like leave me a fuck aloneism. I've heard it described as, really.
Exactly, right. And that word has been hijacked by the left, and they've taken that word and the sign which they use on their t-shirts, and they've plunked it on the left. It's not on the left. What they want, in effect, is something else called chaos, right? Now there was a number of famous cases where, and I'll give you an example. Lord Denning, there was a case, and I think it was in Bedford, where a normal everyday member of the public has gone and taken a case to the High Court, and it was to do with a council, and the council has said, "Oh, we're going to find him this because he's done X," right? So the guys took him to court and said, "You can't do that. It's against my constitutional rights, and it's against the law." And the other side obviously argued it wasn't. And Lord Denning looked at what the man had put before him, and he wasn't a barrister, wasn't a lawyer. He just presented his own case of Lord Denning. Lord Denning looked at the case and said, "No, I agree." So the other side turned around and said, "Well, you can't make this unlawful, because if you do, it will create chaos," right? So Lord Denning used the term from somewhere else, but he said, "The law is the law and must be obeyed. Let the heavens fall," right? And what he was actually saying is, I don't care, right, what you say as a local authority. His individual rights are infringed, and the law is the law and must be obeyed, and therefore I am finding in his favour. That was one of the last real English judges, right? So again, people need to understand where it comes from. So I've just shown you that. There's a couple of books on, for example, the common law, right? So I'm going to show you another book here. This is just one of them, right? And it's that thick. That's basically administrative law. So before you get to the real law, right, the common law that protects you, they put in place administrative law. Books and books and books of law to obstruct you from getting justice. That's what their game is, right? And administrative law is the European Union law or Roman law or Scottish law, whatever you want to describe it. It's alien to the English, right? And that is what they've done. And then you get another type of book. Again, you'll like this. We're involved in a couple of cases at the moment, right? But there's a book here. It was written, there is, Pleadings Without Tears, a guide to legal drafting under the Civil Procedure Rules, 9th edition. And it was revised and updated by Roger Eastman. Who is Roger Eastman? He is a common law judge in the High Court. He was one of the people that wrote this and assisted writing it and editing it and etc. And then when you write a case out and you put it all like this, and they go, no, you can't do that, and you turn around and say, well, that's not what Roger Eastman said, who's the head of the common law courts in London, right? And all of a sudden people start going, oh, hang on a minute, because they've taken away legal aid. The lawyers and barristers and solicitors are not with us anymore. They're part of the system. So you need to teach yourself law, basically, to get justice, and then you'll come against the system which Lucy Letby has, which I had previously, where it will attack you. And what you've got to do is have the courage and the intelligence to know exactly what you should be doing and shouldn't be doing. So where I come from, as it were, I'm a working class person that understands my constitutional rights, that understands that we was handed the eternal flame of freedom to hand on to the next generation, and that we are the ones failing it. So when you referenced nationalism earlier, I call it nationism, right? So I want England to be independent, and I'll get to the reason why in a couple of seconds. I want Wales to be independent. I want, which by the way was nothing to do with any of us living today. It happened in 1536, right? But it is a common law jurisdiction, and it should be very protective over that, right? Unlike Scotland. Scotland, again, I want them to become independent, but they're Roman law jurisdiction, right? And again, getting back to the reasoning, England has been a nation since 927, so very nearly 1100 years as an independent nation. People need to understand the very basics that Great Britain is an island. It's called Great for a reason, right? And I'm not talking about the British Isles, I'm talking about Great Britain, right? Great Britain is an island, and the reason why it's called Great is because it contains three independent nations with three independent cultures: Wales, England, and Scotland, right? What happened in 1706 and 1707 with the Acts of Union was that was a treaty between Scotland and England. And what it did was it created, for various reasons, which I won't go into at the moment, it created a political union. It did not create a country. It created a political union. No different to the European Union, no different to the USSR, no different to what Yugoslavia was, no different to what the American Union is today, right? Centralized control. Centralized control means you allow the dark personalities to come in above you, right? And that's why the world's in a bad place at the moment, right? So again, once people understand, it is the union which is a stepping stone. All unions are a stepping stone, as empires are, to globalization and global central control. And then once people realize, so what happens when we pull the plug from the Acts of Union? So in English law, there's a difference between repeal and void. If you make it void, all laws made under the British Union and the British Union Parliament since 1707 are null and void. That means you return back to a reset position, and the reset position are all laws before that point are still valid, right? And that's how you do a people's reset. We already had a glorious revolution. We already had a civil war in this country. Many people say to me, is there going to be a civil war? And I've said to them point blank, we're in one now. You just haven't seen the kinetic energy of that war yet, but we are currently in a civil war. And it is between the dark personalities or the dark triad and us, you, the people, right? And what you get is these dark triads dividing and ruling, because that's what these people do, whether they be psychopaths, narcissists, Machiavellian, or sadists. Their traits are the same. They divide and rule. That's where it comes from, right? They will pitch people against each other, even families against each other, right? Because that's what they do to divide and rule. And when people really understand this process and who these people are, it is very easy. So I'm going to put it in a narcissistic term. For anyone out there that understands narcissism, they'll understand what I'm saying. To avoid the Acts of Union is to discard the narcissists, discard the people that are controlling us. And then people go, what will happen then? Well, you'll get something from them, which is already what I get from them types of people, which is called narcissistic rage, right? Which they know they're losing. They know that you've discarded them. They know that you know who they are. The most difficult thing that they have to cope with, which means the dark triad and dark personalities that have made this world as mad as what it is today, the most difficult thing for them is you exposing who they are, right? And that's what we're doing at the moment, is exposing that. So part of the jigsaw puzzle is people need to understand that the people running the union, if you want to call it that, running the union are dark personalities.
Yeah, man, that was there's a lot to talk about there because when you were talking about administrative law and when you were talking about common law, is that what the alternative is? Administrative law, it makes me think that's what comes from the universities and the think tanks, in a sense, how to wield the law that comes from government, which would be the common law, should come from some form of governance. And there's when you're then talking also about, academia, right, to start being completely and utterly wretched, that is something that they're so interlinked. I think I always end up returning. I did a load of research. I wanted to know what Bohemian Grove was, once upon a time. But instead of going and listening to Alex Jones tell me what Bohemian Grove was, I went back to the 1800s and started researching the beginning of Bohemian Grove, and it was really interesting. There was a brilliant journalist called Alice Ricks who tries to describe the people of the Grove quite well, and it splits up. This is what the Grove say themselves. These people say themselves. It splits up the ruling elite into academics, into government, and into Bohemians, and how these different parts, these three parts of society, the top echelons, work together secretly behind the scenes in a very Machiavellian way, to get to meet their ends, their desired ends, and their desired ends are to create a group that controls all of the rest of what they can homogenize. Really, that's the idea for I wonder whether that want, the human desire to homogenize, to synthesize. And we see this with like Hegelianism as well, it ends in synthesis. Everything always seems to end in synthesis. We look forward at the future, we see transhumanism, it ends in synthesis, man and machine. We seem to just join in with whatever we discover as new, rather than really cradling what we've discovered, which is useful, because new isn't always useful and is very often dangerous. Is that what the problem is with law? Is that there came a point where was peak law? When was the point when law was the best and started to decrease in value?
I'll tell you what, you've asked a superb question there. A very, 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 very good question.
You're
So
happy about it.
let me sort of unpack it slightly. So what you've just said is, so the common law is completely different to administrative law for another reason, and that is there's something called certitude, I think the word is, right, in law, right? So English law doesn't have that. And what it actually means is, for example, under administrative law, let's say Scottish law, if a law wasn't used for 100 years or whatever, it'd become obsolete. England doesn't have that, right? And the common law is basically judge-made law, right? But there's more to it than that. It's also about your own. So if you come from a particular area, which I've said, say you come from Manchester or Wales, right? And it's the custom in Wales that on a Friday everyone goes out and tings a bell, right? It's just customary. They've done it for hundreds of years. right? I'm not suggesting they do that. It's a custom.
Oh, we ting a load of bells in Wales.
Right? That could be a genuine custom. Let's say
Yeah.
someone then comes along and says, "You can't do that because you wake my kid up," but whatever. I'm not having it. Right? It goes to court, and then the judge would turn around and say, "Well, we've got this statute here that says after 5 o'clock, you're not allowed to ring bells or bib hooters or do whatever." Right?
You're going to do that in Haverfordwest? You think you get away with it?
Right. So what I'm trying to say to you is the judge, then the person turns around who's Welsh, he turns around and says, "Listen, this is a Welsh custom. It goes back." And then the judge will say, "Well, how long does it go back?" And the Welshman says, "Well, it's time immemorial. Well before even memory of
Ages back. That's what you'd say.
That's it. Well, it's called, so the actual legal term is time immemorial, right? So what you do, you say that, and the judge turns around and says, "Well, actually, the customs of Wales take precedent because it's the common law." And then they say, in this instance, "Sorry, Mr. Person whose kid's being woke up, there's nothing you can do about it. He's not doing anything against the law. In fact, he's acting lawfully and by custom," right? So all I'm trying to do is explain to people, whereas if you was in the European Union, right, they would turn around and say, "No, all of your customs have gone, I'm afraid, because this statute was only made 3 years ago."
The Tongwili eyes tingler wouldn't like that.
Yeah. So again, right, you've just hit a good question. Now, when did this peak? The answer is it's not about when it peaked, I don't think. It's when it come under attack, right? So we have drawn conclusions as a group, the English Constitution Society, that it come under attack after the British regime and empire lost America. So in 1776, then the attack started. In the 1800s, we still had some really good laws here, etc. And they started to come under attack. If you really want to know when the serious problems started, it was after 1819 and
I was gonna say probably 1830, 1840, 1850 onwards. Like,
so I mean, I could go into detail with it. So the question really is reversed. Not when did it peak? When did the common law and the Constitution of England come under attack, right? And you could actually go back to the 1600s as well. But for this attack, because there's been different attacks on us, I would have said 1819, Peterloo. If anyone don't know what Peterloo is, it was when the British attacked 70,000 working class people who stood up, and all they did was demanded the vote, and they were making a declaration to withhold tax, right? So that was a big event. 19 of us got slaughtered, men, women, and children, by the British, running us through, charging us with cavalry, hacking us down, literally in peaceful protest and demanding our rights. So that was one event, and then it sneaked through. So there's other things that I could tell you about, but this is the easiest way to explain it from the attack point of view. In 1857, they passed an act which was basically called the Jews Relief Act. And that changed the oath system. Now our system is bound by oath, right? So, and we are, we are a Christian nation, but they changed that as well in the 1930s, 1929, I think it was, somewhere around that time, right? And I could go into detail with that as well and show people it. But what happened with the Jews Relief Act is they changed the oath system so Jews could become members of parliament and judges and other things, right? That caused a big problem. The very first member of parliament that was elected to parliament after they changed the oath system to allow it to happen was a guy.
Big R word.
Was a guy called Rothschild.
Oh, what a surprise! I could have guessed that. Guessed that.
So again, people don't know this. They're not talking. If you talk about it, you're called an anti-Semite, which is all BS, right? We're talking about a group of people. So let me make sure I'm getting this so you this audience understands it. if I was talking about the Russian mafia, right, and talking about the corruption of the Russian mafia, all the way up into the judiciary, all the way up into various elements of the Russian society, everyone would know I'm not talking about the average Russian. The Russian mafia is it's an organized criminality,
Yeah,
right?
like the Italian mafia. You're not talking about the crazy guy on the street shouting at his Citroen, like, you know.
Exactly. So you can talk about the Italian mafia, the Russian mafia, the British mafia, whatever mafia you want to talk about. There's one mafia that goes back millennia that you
Mhm.
cannot talk about, and that's the Jewish mafia, right?
Mhm.
So getting back, I won't go into the 1290s. The 1290s, it was the English who caused them narcissistic injury by rounding them up. There was 3,000 of them living in the country at the time. There was probably a lot more, but let's just say 3,000 of them. 600 of them was rounded up and they was tried for debasing and counterfeiting our currency, right?
Mhm.
300 of them were hung, right? So 600, 20% of the total population of the Jews in this country in the late 1200s were trying to destroy the country. How did it come on top for them? Because they was producing these snide coins. They was then producing them in Europe for goods, etc., paying for goods. Europe was then saying, this is no good, this money. What happened then was people in Europe refused to take English coinage. That then
Mhm.
caused a serious problem for the working people of this country and tradespeople of this country because they couldn't trade with Europe, right?
Mhm.
So the king had to get involved and say, what's going on here? And that's when they rounded them up. That's in short what the story was,
Same
right?
thing happened in Baden-Württemberg in a sense. It was a cultural difference, and the royalty had to get involved after it turned into blood libels and all of that.
Exactly. Right. So there's a lot. Listen, there's a lot of this history. If we went
Yeah,
into
yeah.
the history of this, everyone would go, well, I never knew that because you're not allowed to talk about it because if you talk about it, you're an anti-Semite, right?
Mhm.
We was the first people in 1275, I believe it was, might have been slightly earlier, that created a law that put a yellow badge on 12-year-old Jews so everyone identified who they was, right?
Mhm.
And one of the reasons for that was because the king separated them as a group of people and independently taxed them, right?
Mhm.
So just to make sure everyone's understanding this, there was various other events that happened. You could talk about Aaron of Norfolk. Again, another incident where when he died, he was richer than the King of England. They had to set up a separate probate system and an independent chancery just to deal with his estate. And one of the reasons they had to do that was because the King of England owed him so much money, he was
Mhm.
basically bankrupt because of how much money he owed to this to Aaron and Norfolk. People don't realise once you owe or you in debt the king is the policy maker, you control policy, right?
Mhm.
That's what was causing the problem. So getting back through this, you get to all the way through to 1857, the Jews Relief Act. Rothschild then takes control and becomes an MP. More of their people then start infiltrating through the system. Don't forget the Dark Triad. So I'm not blaming all Jews. I'm saying there's a group of people, they're dangerous beyond belief, right?
Let just very quickly, just remember what you're about to say there. But what you're talking about with that dark triad, it's like I'm almost in complete agreement with the idea of it. It's perfect way to describe how every single group, whether it be Jewish, Christian, Muslim, whether it be Germans, British, whether it be Americans, it makes no difference. They're all going to be susceptible to these narcissistic psychopaths, these Machiavellian characters who rise into a position positions of power where they then recruit each other because they're easier to deal with. They look to impose their power upon everyone else, and we allow them to do that. And
Yeah.
that means that they exist in every single culture, every single country, it's a human condition more than it is related to any one race. Can we agree with that?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
100%. So what you're actually, so 85% of the population are not of a dark triad, are not dark personalities, right? And What we really need to do is implement a system that stops these people getting into position of power. If you did that, you would swap the whole thing, and the 85% would be in control, and that
Ooh. You're
15%.
talking utopia there. Be careful.
Well, again, it's the only way of doing it. So getting back to that position of what happened there, then they get into their positions of power, right? And once they do, they start installing their people that they need in there. And one of the things that led to, less than 10 years later, so I want people to understand this, in 1868, I believe it was, unlawfully, ultra vires, these groups of people repealed Article 3 of the English Bill of Rights, and the English Bill of Rights came from the Declaration of Rights. It came from a convention parliament. So many people out there say parliament can't bind another parliament. Yes, it can, and especially a convention parliament. A convention parliament is not an ordinary parliament. It's called a convention parliament for a reason, right? So the constitutional law and the bill that come out of that was a negotiation between all parties to say, right, this is your inalienable rights, which were some were existing rights, some and they protected all your existing rights by Article 3. That was repealed in 1868, less than 10 years after the Jews have started to take control of Parliament and the judiciary, right? It was unlawful, ultra vires. That's what protected us, right? So if you jump forward even further, just after the Second World War in 1947, they repealed the top and bottom part of Section 2 of the English Bill of Rights. And what they did by altering that paragraph, or the article, what they did was then started to say that Parliament was sovereign. That is not the truth, right? The truth is there's a separation of power, right, in this country, which is the judiciary, the monarchy, and Parliament, both sides of Parliament, right? That is, and each one is a court in its own right.
We've
And
fought civil
English
wars
law,
for such things.
well, again, English law states that you can't be a judge in your own cause, right? That's why they have to have separate entities that control, So if one lot says, but what they've done is they've brought them all into one element, and now you have central control. Central control creates tyranny, right? That's what you've got. And the tyranny is being controlled by the Machiavellians, the narcissists, the psychopaths, and the sadists that are part of the dark triad that put themselves in position. And that is exactly, in a nutshell, what's happened. So if you then reverse back slightly, go back in time to the late 1800s, you'll know what happened. In 1860, there was a war in America, and it was a civil war. It was not a civil war about slavery. It was about control. If you go and read the archives, you will find out it was all about control. The southern states were a confederacy, the same as England was, and the same technically as Wales was.
Yeah,
right?
the states, it was a complicated state of affairs, and I think it should give people pause for thought that there was actually an election during that. Not it was only about I don't know, I can't remember how many. It was something like 9 or 11 states didn't get involved in the election, but other than that, like, it was basically as good as an election as you can get with campaigning going on. It wasn't all as simple as it's made out to be. Sorry, go on.
No, I agree. And some of the people that we talk to in the United States of America, bearing in mind that I've actually done speeches and been at conferences for Texit, for example, Texas in 1836 adopted the English common law and, in effect, the Constitution of England in its entirety. In 1860, the Civil War. In Switzerland, a lot of people don't understand that I believe it was 1858, it might have been 1848, there was a civil war. I think it was called the Sunderland War or something similar to that, right? And again, who was it caused by? It was Protestants against Catholics. Who got expelled from Switzerland after the Civil War? The Jesuits, right? People need to this is a crucial thing for people to understand. Communism comes from Roman times, right? And the people who controlled most of the Roman system were the Jews, right? it's not being an anti-Semite to tell you that. You can go and research history and you'll find out what it was all about. And usury, meaning interest, was one of the ways in which they destroyed the civilizations that they were associated with, right? Christians don't believe in usury, and here's the kicker, people, nor does Islam, right? So who do you pitch against each other if you've got two major religions that don't believe in usury, which is where you're suckling all your money from? How do you deal with that? You pitch them two religions against each other, right? Now, I am a Christian, but I am not a Christian in the way that most people think are brainwashed, by someone in a pulpit reading out to me what it says in the Bible, right? I believe I'm a Christian because I follow Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ, just to make sure everyone's aware of this, was a warrior. He stood up against the Roman Empire. He was tortured by the Roman Empire. He was telling you to heal thyself, right? Because we have everything in nature provided for us through nutrition to heal ourselves, right? All of this pharmaceutical stuff in the background is all part of their evil charade and persona, right? And once people realize what Jesus was really about, one of the reasons why, I'd love to talk to David Icke, right? Because he attacks Christianity. And what I'm saying to him is, really and truthfully, your mindset is very similar to Jesus, right? Because you're thinking for yourself. You're using your own logic and you're seeing things and using your own senses and saying, you shouldn't be doing that. So you get a connection. What is the connection with? It's a connection to the spirit world. It's a connection outside your own consciousness is your independence. And that's what they seek to destroy. And that's what they seek to destroy with the education system that they've got today.
I think most of the most important things Jesus Christ ever taught have not survived the thousands of years of time. If you can take what we know and extrapolate it and expand it out 100-fold, you would be able to really understand what the true teachings were. And I think they would be beyond most of our comprehension now. We live a very selfish life. There's loads of hubris. The darkest people rise up to the top of society. We know this to be so. We know why they're dark. When you say dark triad, that really just connects psychological behavior, behavioral traits of certain psychological sort of subset, and puts it where it should be on.
So a dark triad, to make sure people are aware of this, you've just hit the nail on the head, right? The dark triad, each one within the triad or the dark personality type, psychopath, Machiavellian, narcissist, and add to that sadism, right? Each one of them separately have attributes, traits and tactics which are exactly the same, and you can there picture them. So just to make sure I express this, those people are what me, you, or anyone else looking at them attributes, traits and tactics are what we would describe collectively as evil people, right? And once you understand, that's what's happening. So whether you call them Satanists, whether you call them whatever you call them, the dark personality, and what they don't want is exposure. Because once you start to expose the attributes, the traits, and the tactics, people will see it. It's like they jump off the page at you, and then you go, now I can see who you are, right? That's what we've now got to come together and make sure that people understand what it is that we're talking about.
Yeah, my job is organizing, or at least the job I've given to myself is organizing the reality and letting people trying to see traits, trying to see the same sort of evil people taking power, doing the same sort of things and doing it for something which seems, this is, In a sense, are you a religious person then? Because that idea is really base good versus evil. We are in a fight which is the majority of people check out. This is every society, every all the way back through history. The majority check out and leave. Is it always a dance between good and evil with these
Yeah.
situations?
So one of the things that people really need to understand about this again is the dark triad, dark personalities, what Satanists, whatever you want to describe them as, they have always been there because they're wired wrong, right? And that group of people, it's part of their personality will rise, and we will allow them to rise to them positions for various. And if we don't, there may be a war, there may be this, there may be that.
Mhm.
But when
Mhm.
all the people around the world actually get together, which I think is now happening, different people in different countries have started talking about this, right? It's about exposure. Shine a light on who they are and what
Mhm.
their personality types are. So you said, are you religious? Right. So I don't read the Bible every day. I don't particularly like churches, right? In
Mhm.
fact, some of them give me the EBGBs, right? I don't particularly like people standing there, with a dog collar on and whatever. I have got in my life what I describe as spiritual advisors, right? And a spiritual advisor to me, I mean, I couldn't mention one name, Peter, up near Accrington and Burnley, for example. Really lovely fella, biker. You couldn't meet a nicer fella, right? And he's one of our group, and he is someone I would regard as my spiritual advisor. If I had something really deep that I needed to talk about, I would talk about it to him. If, and again, another person that I believe I have fully connected with, if you want to call it a spiritual on a spiritual level, is you, right? I know that I could have a conversation with you about any subject, right? And you wouldn't take offense to anything I was saying. You would try and work out how we could, what was causing it, where's the pathway through it, what's this? That's what real spirituality is. And generally, so don't forget, a lot of people don't know this. I died when I was 24 years old, right?
Oh, bloody
I
hell.
crossed to the other side, right? I see my mum who died a year before. Don't anyone ever tell me that there isn't another side. There is another side, right? There is an extension of our consciousness, and it isn't. We're on prison planet, right? On a prison planet. Our minds are imprisoned, and they are imprisoned by this group of people that have created, whether it be religion, education systems, indoctrination into thinking a certain way, right? The only true spiritualists are the ones with an open mind, like
Mhm.
you are.
Yeah, it's a real kind thing you say. I agree with you completely. I find that the connection you can have with other people only happens if that person doesn't end up walking out of the room when you hit a point when you're tackling something that they find, whether it be, a no-go zone culturally or religiously or anything like that. I love having conversations. I have seen some conversations turn very quickly. I know that on TNT there was only a couple of guests who there was, a little issue with. One was a Green Party councillor who I asked about climate change and whether he thought it was actually real, and the shock on his face, the complete and utter wow, we can never have a conversation again. It was that look, and I always say to myself, the only people who will come out the other side of something really big are people who will talk across lines. That's
Yeah.
it. Who will try and sort out the mess. And I spent most of my life, probably the first 30 years at least, trying to stay out of everything. trying not to be involved with everything and feeling drawn in and purposely not reading up on things, not looking into things, even when I had a suspicion because of a fear. And I remember how that fear felt, that sort of like, stepping over the line and
Yeah.
seeing whether, there was certain things I allowed myself to indulge in, but lots of things that I was scared of passing over that boundary because I knew what it would mean. It would lift my spirit. It would make me say, I need to know more, I need to do more, I need to be more human, and I need to be more active in being human. Because otherwise, I mean, modern society just seems, what does it look like outside for you, Graham? Does it look like loads of people are checking out and lots of people have been damaged over a long term, both mentally and physically?
Yeah, no, definitely. And the whole point of why lots of people are checking out. And when I mean checking out, I mean committing suicide. People need to let me just give you an indication of this. The USSR had one of the highest, or the highest, suicide rate anywhere in the world when it was up and running, and people were committing suicide because of the control, because of what they were seeing was so wrong, and there was nothing that they could do. They felt like they had no control. That is exactly what dark personality types do to you, right? And they will push you into a psychological position where you believe, they demoralize, they lie, that every attribute that you can talk about that a politician, a judge, or any of these institutions, including academia, have got. Like, let's just talk about anthropology, I believe it is, right? At the moment, you've got a massive issue here where we're talking about, listen, our history goes back thousands of years, 30,000 years, 45,000 years. It's like we're a species with what's it called? Anemia, or when your brain goes completely blank.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right.
Amnesia.
So again, if people can see that, right, but they still won't say anything, and then you've got people in academia saying, no, 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 our history only started from here, and we're saying that's not right. We know it's not right, but all of a sudden we have started to communicate these things to each other, and so let me just talk about because it is really important. I used to be a Samaritan, right? So I want people to understand that there is a degree of empathy that I have with people that are psychologically damaged, right? And when it's happened to you in various different ways, you want to find that pathway, not just for yourself, but for others, right? And that it's a bit like the old story. There's an old saying: "He who plants the ultimate in being selfless is planting the oak tree when you're 90 years old, when you know it will never bring you the benefit of shade, but it will bring the future generations the benefit of shade." That's what our constitution is, right? That's what our common law is. And people need to understand that these people did that for us, and we are the people that need to protect it and not allow people to be cutting big branches off it or even hacking the whole thing down, which is what they're currently doing. So getting back onto the subject of people checking out, and especially in places in Wales. I mean, the suicide rates there. Why is it? Because it has become a socialist nation, right? There are lots of dark personalities controlling Wales. There's the dark personalities are controlling Scotland, and many of them now are controlling England. And regionalisation is part of that. Regionalisation, as opposed to how England used to be. So lots of people don't realise that England was in effect a confederacy, right? Because we had shires and counties that were independently run. We had sheriffs. We had all of the system that was transported to the United States of America, as well as the English language, right? So once we understand that these people are coming under so much pressure, when you look out and you talk to people and you see their depression and you see what's going on, people like myself, people like you, there are many other people out there. We are all shut down. Your platform on YouTube, when you was on TNT, etc., you should have had millions and millions and millions of views with the guests that you was getting on and the subjects you were covering. But it wasn't. It was shut down. And it was shut down. I was shut down on YouTube 3 times. I've been shut down completely on Facebook, shut down on Twitter twice. Even a few weeks ago, they shut down my account. Why? All I'm doing is telling people the truth. So you can see that the truth tellers are the ones who are being shut down. Again, David Icke, right? I'm not giving him all I'm saying to you, I didn't used to like him because he never used to talk about the solution. He'd only ever talk about problems. What I try and do is tell people what the solution is, right? But you need to know you need to find a pathway to the solution. And the solution is the Constitution and the common law. The solution is to put something in place so these people in the dark triad can't get into them positions. We need to find a way of understanding who and what that personality type is and get them out, right? And once we've done that, we as the majority will live in peace forevermore globally, right? That's because you're taking evil out of the equation and you're moving it to one side.
I mean, I just can't see how that can be possible. I know that what you're saying is completely true. If you're the only way to stop corruption is by giving power to something that will become corrupt. So I can't. That's the problem I have. Is what I think is going to be one of the main ways they use a selling point they use for AI eventually, for AI control and for algorithmic control, is they'll say, oh, we'll be taking the humans out of the equation, so you will no longer have the worries about this. But these worries are going to persist because it's going to be humans who program the initial decision of what it's all meant to be like anyway.
Who programs the algorithms?
Yeah. So how do we come to a solution?
Yeah. So again, I do understand what you're saying, which is why you have separation of power, right? You should never have centralized power, whether it be AI, whatever it means it is. It doesn't matter what it is. You should never centralize power, which is what a communist and fascist system is, right? Because let's say Cromwell was a nice guy. He wasn't. Let's say he was a nice
Let's
guy.
just pretend for a moment that
We'll
Cromwell
pretend he
wasn't
was a
such
nice
a
person,
bastard.
right? Let me tell you something. Someone would have stepped in after him who wasn't a nice person. So one of the things he done was centralized things, right? Even though he did. I mean, there was John Lambert, who was one of his generals, who wrote out a constitution.
Lambert family go back quite far. They're extremely powerful people.
Well, again, and I think it was Article 38 or 39, can't remember now, where it basically said if anyone does anything against the rights of an Englishman, it's null and void. Right, that was in a written constitution from that time period, right? So again, what I'm saying, you just said, how do you deal with these people? The way you deal with the people is you have to know who they are. For psychopaths, they've now started scanning and they know who they are, right? Narcissists have probably got the same bad brain. I don't know, right? This is a discussion for the people who understand all that far more than me. But one way to deal with it is to say to Elon Musk, are you one of them? If we brain scan him and he says no, he's not, we say, I'll tell you what we do. We'll put them all on your spaceships and we'll send them to Mars. Right? and then everyone goes, yeah, right. That's one way of dealing with them.
Yeah, the jumping up in the air trick. Yeah, no, I mean, that is something that's going to be there is a change of. Again, this is AI, technology, other things coming in mean that there's loads of different things that people aren't thinking about that are going to change our understanding of the law too, and our understanding of our relationship with society. One is the ability to find information that was previously hidden or controlled. So we can see that now with people being able to do like checking people's faces and finding out who they are. That's going to expand to, can you imagine you're all trying to be a load of private OnlyFans models who are protecting your privacy? You don't want these crazy, deranged, sexed up guys finding where you live, and they can just go bum, 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 and find out where you are straight away. That's going to also surely work within the idea of personality types. Eventually, isn't it going to be that we're leading to a point where technology will have to typecast us in some way? And how far away are we from such things? That's a really hard question.
Well, I sort of agree with you. We've got on the English Constitution Society website, we created something called a Digital Bill of Rights that covers everything that you've just said. So one of the things that people need to understand about the Constitution, for example, is you can add to it, but you can't take away people's rights. That's because they're inalienable, right? So you can add to people's rights, but you can't take away. So what we've done is created a digital Bill of Rights that would run in conjunction with the English Bill of Rights of 1688 and adds to your rights. And part of what that says is you can't have central bank digital currency. You must have some form of physical exchange currency, right? It's illogical and stupid to think that some sort of digital currency, whoever it is made by, right, in relying on electricity. I mean, if an asteroid was was to hit, I don't know, somewhere, and the whole of the planet went out for electricity, what are you going to do then, right? And again, there would be massive famines. You wouldn't be. People don't realise and don't put enough thought into all of the really bad things with that. But you've just said about facial scanning. I mean, part of that English Digital Bill of Rights tells you that your retina scans, your blood type, your bloods, your hair, your facial recognition, your fingerprints. Every part of that is your copyright. It does not belong to a government. It belongs to you, right? And therefore, no one can use that unless you give permission. It is your copyright, not theirs, right? Every aspect of it. So all of that information, again, we've put in AI. We've said you cannot use AI for nefarious purposes that go against human rights and humanity. You cannot use AI to target people in wars. You can't use it as a drone system or a mass drone attack system on human beings, right? So lots of that information and what you've just described is in that. Will they allow that to propagate out there? No, they won't. Because it's common sense that normal everyday people are saying, hang on a minute, we do. Now, don't forget, I used to be an engineer and a systems engineer. So and in telecommunications, I helped build the internet as we know it today. Do I like the way it's been abused? No. But again, the very people that helped build it, such as myself and others, right? I mean, physically build it globally, right? We built that, and it is now being abused by the state and keeping the very people, such as myself, such as you, such as off of platforms, right? They're designing, so the very people that help build a system for everyone to have free information and information, real archives, etc. The very people that helped build that are now being kept out.
How many? So you got. I was really disappointed to see it that you got your main account, your account that was under your own name, got axed on X. They I take it there's no way they'll give that back to you. No,
They haven't even told me the reason why they've took it down.
there you go.
And so I've appealed something. They haven't even given me a reason why they've took it down. They've just took it down. So I've had 15,000 some years ago, 15,000 followers on Twitter. They took that account down. This one was just building up to 8,000. Took ages to get it up there. Got it up there. They took it down. They took me off of Facebook years ago, 5 years ago. They took down my PayPal account can't get a PayPal account in any of my bank accounts
Oh,
or name.
wow.
As soon as I do, it takes it out. And again, no one said a word when it happened to me.
Oh, dirty
Right, but when it
waters.
happens to Nigel Farage, right, everyone's up in arms, right? When it happens to me, no one said a word. So again, what I'm saying to people, YouTube account, I was just under 100,000 subscribers with one account, right? Took it out. I had 25,000 on another account. They took it out. 2,500 on another account. Took it out. And all I talk about is the Constitution, the law, and what the type of things we're discussing now.
Hmm. Unbelievable, isn't it? They're not going to stop, really, though. I get a really big feeling that we're entering into a different wave. Where do you see this going? Do you see there being more? Because there was one point where it felt, with all of the spaces on X, all of these sort of things, that the platform like that was opening up almost completely. But I get a feeling they're just about to flip narratives. Are we going to continue along the same paradigm we're going now? Or is it suddenly that they're going to start flipping things on us? Because I get a feeling this is the era of fifth generation warfare. And what does that mean in constitutional law? I mean, what does that mean for independence? What does that mean for freedom?
Oh, there's a big one. Are they intending to flip on us?
Because I think a lot of the people, a lot of the things like, COVID, etc., they was caused such large hoo-ha, so much censorship. But really, what they want to do is they want to open up everything, so everybody's talking about everything all of the time. Recently, I go through my feed, say on Twitter, and I'm flicking through videos, and it's like videos of Nazis on pedlos, videos of Nazis doing Zeke Heils with red eyes, shouting at white people, getting them to do the same thing too. The people fighting in the streets, and they seem to be suddenly talking about a load of things that you weren't allowed to talk about previously. And I get a feeling that's the script that's going to flip really quickly. Is suddenly there's a load of information rather than a little information.
Possibly is the
Yeah.
answer. Um, so there's elements to what you've just said. I mean, let's talk about President Trump, right? Took the movement forward, said he was going to tell everyone what happened to JFK, told everyone he was going to tell everyone the truth about what happened with 9/11. None of it happened, right?
Mhm.
Um,
He
is
said it
that
again now, though. He's going to do it again now.
well? So is it? So is that situation because he never realised how deep the deep state were, and the deep state really is the dark triad, right? And these groups of people that are all controlling everything, right? Um, even a millionaire or even a billionaire, in some instances, can still be quite naive. Um,
Mhm.
was he naive? I don't know. The issue that I've got is, how can I put this? The easiest way to say this is just to say it straight, right? If you're looking for a knight in shining armor, for a hero to ride in on that horse and save you, it ain't happening, right? The hero is within you as an individual. The only person who even slightly tried to reverse anything against the British Empire and succeeded, and he didn't do it with violence, was Gandhi. And he did it by telling the people, we need you out on the streets. We need you passively to resist the British Empire, the people who are dividing and ruling us, the people who are killing us, the people who are murdering our people.
See why you get cancelled saying stuff like that.
Well, again, um, Gandhi was was the
He
person,
was cancelled.
and he was right. So at the end of the day, right, the main message here is the hero is within you, right? Don't look for a person riding in like Trump or anyone else that's going to save you, because it ain't happening, right? people need to get out. And one of the reasons why they don't like my message is because I literally say that to people. You need to get organised in England and Wales, but as separate nations. You need to get
Mhm.
it. You need to get organised locally. You need to have discussion groups on the constitution, our rights, etc., and what I call a constitutional, missed it, constitutional militia, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that means basically you go back and you take back the counties and shires um, via your own volition. You organise that, but again, you've got to be very careful because in all of these positions, what you get is someone who is a narcissist that will start to move in. It happened with the stand in the parks, right? I went round and give lots of different speeches at stand in the parks all over the country that was standing up against the lockdowns and against the jibby jab and all that stuff, right? And we was going out there and talking to people, and then what you see is these different people from that personality type start to take control of them groups, right?
Yeah.
And the only time it never happened was with another group of people which were regarded as rebel on roundabouts, right? Because there was no interaction majorly. They just had their message on a board and stood on a roundabout. Everyone should have seen them, and they got the greatest communication. It was far better than a stand in the park
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
because all of those local areas and local people, and I used to watch the local people pull up and be like that. I even watched the
Yeah.
old Bill pull up and say, and read the
Yeah.
boards. That's the
Yeah.
thing. People used to come along and then slow up and read the boards or get out their cards and read the boards. And then you can see their brain going, hang on a minute, do you know what I mean? There's more people thinking like me. And that was the only way. And again, I thought that rebels and roundabouts was the best way of doing it. But just to make sure everyone understands what I'm trying to say to you, is them individuals that did that, the hero was them. The hero wasn't someone who organised it. It was the people that went out and actually stood there with them boards and showed you in the individual messaging on them boards. Each one of them people was a hero,
Hmm.
right? Whereas the stand in the parks was slightly different, not initially, but it become hijacked. I mean, there's plenty of people I can talk about that I consider to be of narcissistic personality type or psychopathic type or the traits, etc. And they always manage to get to them positions.
Now, this is something you said there, where you're talking about militias, and for people who don't really understand the difference, a militia and a regiment, a militia is more ununiformed, independent. People can disagree, agree, be involved. I grew up in. People who listen to this probably know by now. I grew up in the 17th century in the Sealed Knot. So my father was Colonel John Birch of Birch's Regiment of Foot, and it was a regiment of 250 people. But we started out as a militia of 13, and once it was changed into a regiment, that allowed for the rise of the narcissists.
Yeah,
So this suggests that militia level is where you can keep control of narcissistic intent, and it doesn't work so well because to
yeah,
split a militia, you're only splitting something small. So is there something about this, like to fight the globalist blob? Do we have to go to an extremely small level?
yeah. Um, you have to take it back to complete local level and local communities. That means parish level, village level, town level, district level within towns. Everyone, and then you come together and do the different bits and pieces. But the only way, so the antithesis to globalization and the global system is nationism, not nationalism, nationism, right? Where you respect your Welsh heritage, your English heritage, your Scottish heritage, your Irish heritage, right? And we built this system. Whether you look at the cathedrals, Parliament, whatever you want to look at in the world, right? In terms of England and Wales, it was a working people that built that, right? And we need to start having respect for ourselves. And again, if you go back to slavery, Granville Sharp, right, was a working class man, right? The left, well, we say he wasn't because he was a son of a deacon, right? The reason why I call him working class is because he didn't go to university. His family run out of money. They put him into a trade. He was a tailor, right? And then he started making money as a tailor, right? So he was a tradesperson. He was the person who stopped slavery. It wasn't the British. He was English. He was working class, and he was from Durham. And again, I want to make sure I emphasise this. All this BS we have about diversity and inclusion, right? I'm not interested in that, right? England, in particular, Wales in particular, has its own diversity. That's
Mm.
why we have working class accents, right? Who are despised by the British, and especially anyone who speaks the King's English, right?
Yum yums, like yum yums.
Well, exactly. So when you start going to, Durham and Manchester and Newcastle, right?
Yeah,
You
those
start getting these
humbers, you can't
accents.
trust them.
Well, when we all stood in the trenches together, we was just
Mhm.
working class people. Our diversity, we knew where you come from, what area. We even knew what some of your customs were. We even knew if you come from, Lancashire or anything like that. When you're in a conversation with someone and they say, "Stop mithering me," right? You start to learn they've even got their own language or words for bothering me, right? Which was so. What I'm saying is we've already got our own diversity. We don't need any of this other BS, right? And getting back to Granville Sharp, right? A very famous case, and it was just one of the cases. There's many cases going back centuries. You can't be a slave in England, which is why all the blacks come to England when we ruled it unlawful. We said it's unlawful in the common law. You can't do it. You can't be a slave in England, right? So the blacks come here. I feel personally that we have been betrayed because we was the ones who stood up and stopped the slavery, right? Because we was once slaves, right? We stopped the slavery. Now they're all turning on us. And by the way, people, do you
Mhm.
know that the Abolition Act, right? Part of that was to pay compensation to the slavers, right? Which wasn't us and it wasn't the working class. How did they pay back that massive, great big loan that they got from the Rothschild Bank? Because we paid it back in our taxes, right?
Mhm.
And we only recently stopped paying it off. So when people start talking about reparations and all, you say, hold up a minute, do you know what I mean? It was the white working class. When you all come over here and you was in St. Giles's Square, right, sitting there begging because you had no money, it was the white working class that looked after you,
Mhm.
right? And it was, and then again, if you go into the history of Granville Sharp, it's such a fantastic story. His memoirs are fantastic, right? And he was just like us, right? He stood up against the system, and he turned around and said, you can't have a slave in this country." There was very few slaves in this country, and
Yeah,
by the way, white working class kids were treated worse than slaves, and the reason was because no one had paid for them. They wasn't anyone's property. And in the mills, they used to stick kids into machineries. They'd get mangled up,
mhm,
4 year
mhm,
olds get killed, right?
mhm.
Because they was white working class and weren't of no value.
When was he prominent?
Sorry.
When was he prominent?
He was prominent in the mid to late 1700s. Granville
Oh
Sharp.
wow, late 1700. Yeah, because I one of the I mean it was a bit of a reveal for me. I've been researching a few different things in the background that I don't really talk about that often, and one of them meant looking at a lot of northeast England and Liverpudlian sort of area, industrial revolution time, so between 1830 to 1870. It's just astonishing. If you go to the hatters of Atherstone in Leicestershire, and you look down the Watling Street. If you go and look at all of the white working class who were working in the factories and they were fitting in toxic machinery that would make them all as mad as hatters. They would all be like the ones who work as slaves day in day out. You look at their living conditions. I've got like large surveys from history to look at where people were living and how people were living in little places like that, and it's just extraordinary. It's one house has like 10 people living out in the back garden in different shedded type sort of areas where they all had to live communally. People have this idea that the white working class had it different to many different ethnic minorities who were all around the world at that time, but they had some of the worst conditions. They were experimented on, abused.
Yeah.
They were it is seriously disgusting to look back on. But when you were saying earlier that after that sort of point when 1776 onwards, really after the American got their freedom and took it on and then had their civil war themselves, Britain really started to look inwards a lot more and start to put its control inwards. So I think that's when really white slavery started, because I mean the kids were being sold on ships to Liverpool. There's a long line of kids all with tags around their necks, sold off by their families when they were 13, 14, 12, whatever, and they would be working under deck, wouldn't see a bit of sunlight. They would be just putting coal into hot fire until they got old enough or injured enough that they would be kicked off the ship or would escape. I mean, it was servitude, and it was some of the worst abuse that we've seen within our society. I think it's still happening now. We're still in that case. So we've been rocking around in the past a lot. And just like as we approach towards the last part of this, what I really want to discuss is how you've got involved in what you're doing now, because you get involved in court cases, you take things to court. For someone like me, I got like I got 100 things I'd like to take to court. I think everybody's like that, when they really realize that the man's been getting them down and it's provable for any reason. You start to be like, I want to go and sort out. What makes you choose this path? What makes you choose the cases? What makes you go in this direction?
So again, there's a number of good questions there. The direction is to teach people and educate people and be outside of their education system. If you want to describe it as homeschooling, then what I do is go to the archives and show people the receipts. This is what the law actually says, right? Don't matter what these people, and don't forget, omission is it's part of the Fraud Act now, right? So if you don't tell someone something, it's fraud, right? So when people are out there now saying we haven't got a constitution, not only are they committing fraud, they're committing treason, because it's subversion of our constitution to even say that, right? That's the first thing. So it's about education. Why am I educating people? Because the state. So there's another old saying, and it will probably resonate with you. You'll understand this, and a lot of people listening, right? If you send your children to a Roman school, don't be surprised when they come back supporting Caesar. Right? People need to understand that's what the state education system is, whether it's university or not, is irrelevant.
I got to use a pun here. I got to say, all road scholars lead to Rome. There you go.
So again, everyone needs to understand that concept. So you need to educate people. It's like anything else, and I get back to the difference between being British and English. They only created British identity in 1947, and then they extended it and nailed it in the British Nationality Act 1981. What did they do? They erased the Welsh identity, Scottish identity, English identity, and Irish identity, and they replaced it with a label, and that label was British, right?
Mm.
So what do you do when you replace a label? Well, if I was to say to you, you're Welsh, right? The British regime would go, no, 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 no. No, he's British, right? And then by saying that, what they're doing is they're erasing your rights, which come with the Welsh identity and the English identity and the Scottish identity, and they erase it by putting the label British on it. So that's one of the things that we're teaching people, because that the last person to do that, by the way, was a guy called Joseph Stalin, who was the commissar of identity in the USSR. And what did he do?
He was a bad guy.
Well, he erased all of the identities and said, "You are a Soviet, right?" This, so if you was in the USSR, the same as in the European Union, they're trying to erase national identity, and they're all saying, "Don't create wars." Bullshit, right? They know what it creates, and it creates resentment. You already saw that with Yugoslavia. When they took Yugoslavia down, you got a war. It was mixed, but quite a bit by NATO and a few other people, but that's what you got, right? And there's various elements to it. So on the secondary level of your question is, how do I pick cases? They must be strategic in nature, right? So Charlie Staples' case, who's currently in the courts for against the police and four individual police officers and the Metropolitan Police Commissioner for torture, it is a strategic case. So people will start looking at it. We're now saying to people like Inquest, which is a massive NGO that gets millions of pounds every year, got QCs or KCs coming out of every orifice, right? Never, ever, ever taken a single police officer through the court system for torture, even though it's been on our books. So originally 1640, we banned or made unlawful torture. The Scots carried it on. To be fair, they used to rendition the English to Scotland until 1708, when it was completely abandoned. And the whole point of what I'm trying to say to you is it must be strategic. So majorly, one of the things you've just said, there's lots of things I want to take on the call. I always try and tell people, I'm not a solicitor, I'm not a barrister, I am an independent legal historian, and I don't know everything, right? Our history is so vast, legal history, and we've got lots of archives that you could go through, and all of a sudden you'll find something new and say, hang on a minute, right? That's what you need. You need teams of us reading that material and then going, Graham, right? And then all I do is assist people to push that in a court of law, and then say, I'm not a free man of the land, I'm not a straw man, I believe in the Constitution of England and the common law of England as the number one social justice system in the world. So why do I do that? Because we can't be the ones to drop the ball. And it's obvious to me, very obvious to me, by simple logic, what you always look at what your enemy fears the most, right? So with narcissistic people, it is exposure, that you go through their traits, that you go through their attributes, you go through their tactics, and all of a sudden people can see the narcissist coming out of the crowds, and you think, whoa. So exposure is important, and what we do is expose what the people are doing, right, in the background. So what we're doing is actually showing people, this is your constitution, these are your inalienable rights. We the people are, and again, just as a quick one, right? Remember the power of a jury, and it's why the Lady Chief Justice now wants to abolish juries, right? The power of a jury. When 12 good men and true take the oath, they do it under their own conscience. Our constitution and our common law says you cannot appeal, the state cannot appeal, no one can appeal a jury's verdict of not guilty, right? A juror and a group of jurors are the only people that can nullify in the instant case, so the case before them, they can nullify the common law, meaning judge's law. they cannot nullify parliamentary law. So in other words, if it's against the law and it says it there, they can nullify it, and they can nullify the King's law. So if that group of people who have taken oath to listen to that case can nullify the three types of law that exist in England, who is sovereign? If they can nullify the King's law, parliamentary law, and the common law, Judge May's law, the three elements, if you want to call it, as the separation of powers, right? Because that's what should exist in this country. Who is it who is really sovereign? And the answer is you. You as a juror, when you take that oath, right? You are the person who can free that man. That's why they seek to destroy the common law. That's why they want to impose tribunal law, which is administrative law, and that's what we're fighting against. So what I do is highlight that.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, like, how can we stop it happening apart from with knowledge? And so that's what I see you doing quite a lot, is spreading knowledge around and giving people advice more than anything. But you actually stand up in court as well, and you do the stuff, and you stand alongside people who need your help.
Yeah, as an offence friend.
Why Charlie then? Why did you think that was such a good?
Well, there was two reasons with Charlie. One, because it was during the lockdowns and they took an outrageous liberty and they did technically torture him, and they went one step further, which was they then said that he had bitten a police officer, and then he had to go for a trial. When he represented himself through the trial, he got a unanimous not guilty at Isleworth Crown Court, right? But the second reason was because he was one of our members and he was coming to meet us at Trafalgar Square. There was no reason to do what they did. He's completely passive. He's a young fellow. He was 23 at the time. And when you've got people that are looking to you and coming to you and sharing your experience and your knowledge and helping and assisting, you can't walk away from them, right? And especially when the system has done that. It's a bit like the friends of Lucy Letby, right? They haven't walked away from her.
No,
her mum and dad ain't walked away from her.
Something I definitely
understand that.
I'd love to hear your view now on Lucy Letby, because I mean, I have a massive, like, when I hear how the case was covered by the mainstream media, all my alarms were going off the entire time, because I am a journalist. So I know how the mainstream media works. I know how this happens. I know that there's, always scapegoats being just put out. And it made me think, the whole thing made me think this evidence is going to be surely reviewed, and there's going to be holes to it, and there's all going to be loads of stuff. It looks like there's some of that happening, but there's a lot of resistance within the legal system. So can you give us a little bit of a clue about what is the truth, what could be the truth, and where the case stands?
That's another massive. I mean, you could probably talk for hours on this, but I was one of the first people talking about this on my show on Rumble, the Full English show. So I'll tell you exactly what's happened. This is what's happened. Lucy Letby was an experienced nurse and experienced in looking after premature babies. That particular hospital and that particular ward had raw sewage running through it. The doctors, probably narcissistic in nature, were incompetent, right? They were more frightened of her telling people what's going on in this ward than they was of anything else. So the system had to protect itself, and the only way they could do that was to create a case, a lie about her, present it to a jury. So juries are fallible. If you tell them lies, it's obviously going to come to the wrong conclusion. No different to the system today telling you haven't got a constitution when you clearly have. People then believe they haven't got a constitution, so the system is winning, and it's going to slaughter you. That's exactly what's happened with Lucy Letby, sorry. If you understand all of the situations there, defence really weren't with her, and again, that's the problem. That's a big problem in this country. That's why you need independent lawyers. So you imagine someone like me that understands the law, the court process, etc., and could stand up in the court like we used to, because we used to have something called the Court of Common Pleas, right? And a normal everyday person, it was known that every Englishman was a common lawyer. So therefore, you knew your rights, you knew how to present a case, you would go and speak to a judge, but now it's completely changed. There's other things that are really bad with this system. People don't realise that the Crown Prosecution Service has only existed since 1985, right? And it was part of the system to start cracking down on you. And the basis of it is the National Health Service has become a socialist religion, even though it is badly managed, it is badly run. A lot of the people involved now are coming from abroad with, let me tell you something now. I will tell you, fake qualifications as doctors, right? Fake experience, fake nurses, right? And I can tell you, even on building sites, it happens, right? I can do £3,000 worth of training to be a crane supervisor and pay for it in this country and have proper qualifications and then go through the process of experience after that and get a blue card or whatever you want to get, right? In Romania, you can buy that ticket for a tenner and it shows up on our system as valid, right? So who has got the experience and the qualification? The qualified person here, and I'll give you another example. If you went and paid for a driving license in Nigeria and it costs you a fiver, and then all of a sudden you come over here and start driving, right? Who do you think is going to be the better driver over here? Do you think it's going to be the person who's been trained properly over here, passed the test, gone all through the theories, gone all through this stuff, bang, 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 bang? Or do you think it's the person who's just paid a fiver in Nigeria for their driving license, right? Because that's the way the world has gone, right? So the same situation is what's currently going on with the National Health Service. Go and ask any nurse who understands the National Health Service, who was trained 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago in the National Health Service, by the National Health Service, then go back to before we was a National Health Service, when they was all independent trusts and community hospitals, etc. The level of care, the level of expertise was far superior. So what does the system need to do? It needs to protect itself. Why? Because the National Health Service is a major money laundering system, right? For the dark triads, and the dark triads will put themselves in place in the management positions. You can go and research this. I think it was the Daily Mail that created about 5 years ago, maybe 10 years ago. They'd done a big article and they said every single year, 7.5 billion of fraud through procurement, right? Mainly through the drugs, right? That are bad drugs that they're giving you, that are making you, etc., right? Nutrition is the key element to staying healthy. But how many doctors are actually told about nutrition? None. Right? They get about 30 minutes of a lecture in 7 years worth of training, because it's all about the pharmaceuticals. The pharmaceuticals have taken over the training of that, and that's why it's all turned to poop, right? So the answer is because the National Health Service has become a religion. Like any religion, it is corrupted, and once it's been corrupted, the system needs to protect it, and therefore Lucy Letby was used as a scapegoat for a hospital and a ward that was killing babies. It wasn't her killing the babies, it was the system, it was the incompetence, and it was the disgusting conditions of that ward, where little tiny babies like that, there was raw sewage running through the ward. That's what's happened, right?
What you're saying is much more likely. What you're saying is much more likely than the other option, which is what a lot of people like to avoid once they've got their scapegoat. And I mean, we know there have been cases where, and I've done work on cases in the past where people have killed loads of people and stuff, like Dr. John Bodkin Adams back in the 50s in Eastbourne Hospital. He injected loads of people, got him to put him into his will, into their will, and then he'd inherit their money straight afterwards. He managed that with 130, but that was very much like the idea of someone like Lucy Letby killing a load of babies just doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't, and maybe that's just a natural human reaction to the idea of a woman and and the idea of a woman protecting children. But it seems like something. Where do you see the case going then? Because obviously it was crooked. I've heard a bit about the information involved that were, especially like they said she made loads of notes about stuff, and they used all those notes against her. Yet she was told to keep notes for trauma, to help with trauma and overcome trauma, and notes, traumatic notes that you're told to keep by a psychiatrist who's connected to the establishment, and which looks like it's trying to fit you up for what they've done in this context. Where do you think this is going?
The problem is you're up against the system, and the system is corrupt to the core. The independent review body for criminal cases is corrupt to the core. It's a bit like investigating the police and going to the IOPC who investigate the police, and then you learn that over 200 of their organisation are ex-police officers, right?
Yeah.
And they're all getting their pensions, and they're all so remember one other thing. I'm going to say this because it's important. Part of the socialist system is pensions. So when they pay these people pensions, they keep their mouth shut because they don't want to look, I'm all right, Jack, right? They just want their pension, right? That's the same with judges, right? I mean, in Charlie's case, they brought in a retired judge getting a pension. We want you to boot this case out of the High Court and put it into the County Court, right? And she did, right? So the whole system is corrupt to the core. So where do I see it going? Unless people with a bigger voice than me start talking out and telling people this is all wrong. Do I think something is happening out there where people have started to look and say there's something seriously wrong? Yes, I do. Is there any way? I can tell you something else. So let me say, where is it going? I mean, I pray that she's going to get released, because she was just a normal, hard-working nurse, intelligent, loved her job, and stitched up by the system, by the National Health Service themselves, right? Another thing that people don't know about that case, there was a guy that recently just got killed. He got not guilty in America for a major fraud. And there was two of them. You'll probably remember the names of them. One of them got killed in a yacht where some freak weather system.
Yeah.
What people don't
I can't
know.
remember what their names are, but yeah, I know who you talk about.
Right. Well, the person who got killed on that boat, and by the way, his co-defendant was killed on the same day he got run over in Cambridge. Right. That person who got killed on that boat happened to be one of the best statisticians in the world. Right. And he was a billionaire, and he was then going to fund and get all these statisticians to present evidence in her favour, because he said, this is a stitch up, this is wrong. She didn't do this, right? Next thing you know, he's dead on a boat, right? So all I'm just trying to say to people is people are not connecting the dots, and they need to. And I mean, the final thing I'll say to you, everyone thinks about, not everyone, but some think there's different ways of checking out. You can check out and commit suicide, or you if you're middle class, right, you've possibly got enough money to leave this country. I'm seeing lots of people doing that, lots of people with money, right? All I'm going to say to you, if you're working class out there, there ain't nowhere to go. There ain't nowhere to hide, right? This is a global problem, not just a nation problem. It's a global problem, right? You might extend, the crocodile will eat you last. If that's what you want, then that's what'll happen, right? But I will say this to everyone listening: when the working class of this country, and I speak of England, takes back control of this country, all those middle class and people with money that went somewhere else, right, to walk away. When we take back this country, don't think you're coming back to run it. That ain't going to happen, right? Because the working class have got to take back control of this country. We've got to get these people out of these positions that they're in now, and it can be done. Again, going back to Cromwell, he didn't just clear out Parliament, he also cleared out the judiciary. And lots of people don't know that. He actually stopped because the judges was taking all the fees and taking all the
Made a
fines.
lot of enemies.
And yeah, that's what I mean. He made a lot of enemies. So he cleaned out the judiciary, he cleaned out Parliament, he cleaned up the system. What we've got to do is move forward and do that again. But we don't want a socialist system. A socialist system is exactly what the globalists are trying to develop now. And it doesn't mean what you think it means. It means control of you, every aspect of your life, until you eventually come to a position that your children will get to a certain age and they will want to check out, literally, right? That's what happened with the USSR. That's what's happening with the European Union. That's what's happening with the British Union now, right? They have proved what they are, and the only group of people that can do that is from dark personalities, and that's what's been imposed upon you.
Yeah, agreed. I was thinking, the thing that stopped John Bodkin Adams going away for 150 years and got him released into freedom and free as a bird and able to start practicing again as a doctor within a decade and a half was his connections with the upper class. He was having an affair with a guy called Lord Gwyn, and the NHS's natural want to protect itself and to cover up the crimes anyway, and look for a way out that was easier. In a sense, no one got justice on that, because all of the people who died were the scapegoats in that case. That's the same.
What case was that?
Dr. John Bodkin Adams.
Yeah. So again, I'm really glad you brought that name up, because who was the chaplain that was associated with him?
Theresa May's father, Hubert Brazier.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And he died mysteriously in a car accident.
Yeah. I was the one who eventually broke that story. I was so exciting. It was like 2017, and it was just before the election. And I remember it was the moment I realized I was definitely a journalist. I had like loads of papers around me, and I discovered that he had been omitted from Wikipedia. A little bit had been taken out of Wikipedia. His page had been taken out, and it was just a little bit that was not included into Theresa May's page, and it was just a picture that showed, of course, where he was, and that led me to investigate that and discover it's a really interesting case. Yeah, he was coming out of Junction, and he was hit. There was someone who contacted me who wanted me to go deep into, I can't remember who it is, wanted me to go deep into the man who actually crashed into Hubert Brazier and killed him in a car accident, because in actual fact he's somehow connected with the establishment as well. So
That's what I mean. Gets deep, doesn't it? And again, you nailed it with that. When Theresa May was the person, and think of what she was doing in the background, trying to fault Brexit, trying to cause all these problems. And then when people started to look at her and look at her father and look at the level of paedophilia in the areas that her father was as a priest, people need to understand that they started to remove all of the references. You couldn't find anything to do with her father, right? So when people really understand what's going on in the background, this is all about dark personalities controlling everything that's going on. Even so, there's another one. If people want to go and research this, Roger Cook, when he started to investigate the devil's work, and then it turns out that they got these people to come in and buy the television company, and it was a new job for the CEO, and it was a big merger. And then as soon as they merged, he took all that information and everything about the devil's work and the whole of that series, put it in Iron Mountain, went into Iron Mountain, and then guess what, people? There was a fire. First fire it's ever had, and it only destroyed Roger Cook's archive. And who was the man that ended up being the
Um,
CEO that was in control of that? What was his name?
I bet you is either. It,
David Cameron.
oh, what a surprise! There you go. There you go.
And then he ended up. I've got a phone ringing somewhere, and I can't work out where the phone is.
He ended up getting rich and famous
Hang on 2
and paid
seconds.
for life. David Cameron, what a bastard too.
Yeah, and
The
then he
man who
ended
brought
up
in
as
the
prime minister.
behavioral, yeah, and bring in the behavioral nudge units of Thaler and the like to start manipulating people's minds. What a bunch of bastards. Well, that has been an adventure down a few rabbit holes, and thanks for sticking with us. That's almost 2 hours of talking there, Graham. You're a man who can talk, that's for sure. I don't think anybody will doubt that. And it's a pleasure. It's such a pleasure to know you. At the moment on X, you're on English Exit. At English Exit. And where can people find you? It's the EnglishConstitutionParty.com, yeah?
Yeah, that's the main one, or the EnglishConstitutionSociety.com. And again, we're on Rumble, the full English show. It's the only platform that's never took me down so far.
Have you got back up and running on YouTube or anything like that
No,
yet?
not
Or you
really. We've
just,
got no, after it, every time they take me down, there's
yeah.
no point, and it all it does is demoralise people. So I've just said, we stick to Rumble. I mean, we've got 6,760 subscribers on there.
Oh, I think I've lost you. I lost you for a little bit.
Oh,
You had
I mean, the worst
6,700 subscribers on there.
on Rumble,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and then again, what people don't realise is on YouTube. I mean, there were occasions where I had 10,000 live views
Hmm.
simultaneously. I mean, it's not as if the people were tuning in and I was
Yeah,
listening.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
used to be on Russia Today every Friday for 20 minutes, having a chat about different things.
I wouldn't be surprised if this gets my channel taken down.
Again. I mean, to be fair, I am quite careful if I know it's going on YouTube. But on Rumble, we literally just don't, and you can see why the British are trying to attack Rumble and take it out of
Hmm.
the game
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
you'll get people like me telling you the absolute truth, and they don't like, and yourself. I mean, it's the only platform I know that will get there, but we just have to wait and see.
Yeah, yeah. I think I like I say, I think there might be a switcheroo coming very, very soon. They're just going to flip it on everybody, and everybody suddenly, all of the normies are going to be discovering that a lot of what because they can't hide everything with AI. Eventually, AI can tell you all of the secrets in the closet, and that's going to be a big problem for them. So they're going to just have to bring them out straight away, and that really is what fifth generation warfare looks like. Suddenly, you don't know what to believe anymore. The only way to do that is to pull the rug from under you. So, Graham, I love you. Thanks for coming on, my man.
No problem. Can I just give a quick shout out to Charlotte Emma, UK? I think you know her as well.
Yeah,
She's
yeah,
one
yeah.
of the producers. She's fantastic. Well done. Keep doing what you're doing. Don't get despondent. Keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, rocking. All right. See you later, gang.
Bye bye.
What we know is that we will end up with many more unemployed